guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from Hero Arts. I am using the Wild Columbine. Totally fell in love with this from the spring release. It does have a color layering stencil. We're not using that. I just wanted to show you. And then we are using the Happy Thanks. I think that's what it's called. Happy Thanks Extra Large Stampin' Cut. And then this alignment tool. This alignment tool actually matches up with their Looking Glass dies. So I will be using the frames for the Looking Glass dies. But this is for a slimline. And this is brilliant. So I have made them before without the alignment tool. And I will link to that video at the end if you want to know how to do it without the stencil. I did not even using any of the Looking Glass dies. I just thought that I would really like the framed off look in my card design, and I do. So anyway, I cut this to exactly the size of the stencil, and the size of the stencil is, if I had laid out my products properly, is 4x9, which they put the measurements right on the stencil for like what your slimline should be. I think it's 3.5 by 8.5. So this should be slightly larger, but I cut mine to the size of the stencil so that I wouldn't have any issues. And I was just going to trim it off later on. I do trim it off later on. You should have done it before I did. But anywho, I will show you at what point you should be trimming it. And it's do as I say, not as I do kind of tutorial here. But anywho, so you saw me put some repositional adhesive on the back. That's not necessary. You can tape it down, but that's how I do all of my stencils. And then I got started ink blending. In my mind, I wanted to make the flowers like a bright blue violet, but I didn't really have a bright blue violet in my markers. So I'm going to make it, basically, is what we have going on here. I'm going to create it by doing what I call color glazing. So here I'm doing my colors. It's like this real pretty tealish green into yellow into orange. And you're probably thinking, Kelly, why would you do that with blue violet? Why? Those colors don't go. These colors are much too bright. And I would agree with you. However, on the color wheel, the complementary color to blue violet is a yellow orange. So I know that they will work nicely together. The split complement for orange, which just means the two on either side of orange's complement, which is blue, it also will work well together. I'm not really explaining that very well. But anyway, that's blue, green, blue, violet, and orange. That would be that split complement. So all the colors will work together. I know that like when we start out, it looks a little wild, but just stay tuned, hang tight. I do like to go back and forth with my blending, as you can see here, and I'm going to go in one last time with this blue-green color, just because the last color that you put on will be the most predominant, and I wanted just a little bit more of this color. I thought it was pretty. Nobody's surprised there. I love a blue-green. I love a blue-green. And then after that is done, I went back and forth about whether or not to add shimmer, and of course shimmer won out. I'm going to leave my stencil in place while I use this iridescent shimmer spray from Hero Arts. I like to shake mine up to get all of the shimmer off the bottom, and then I just use the tubing to kind of splatter it on randomly, just as another way to break up the background and then add some shine to it. So once that is done and dry, I am going to remove my stencil. And this, because I use Tombow Mono Multi Glue, which is repositionable when it dries, it does sometimes leave some sticky stuff behind. That's not really a big deal. I wouldn't recommend trying to get it off with your finger, as your hands, even if you just wash them, have like dirt, makeup, things like that. You can kind of smush it onto your card. So I always use an adhesive eraser. Plus it helps me not to rip my paper, which is important. And then we're gonna move on to the stamping. So for the stamping, I am using a ink that is safe for alcohol markers, because today I am going to be using my OLO markers. I did a review on these recently. Haven't had too much time to really kind of play around with them. And I like that they have a limited color palette. And When I say limited, I mean there's still like 120 colors. Okay. But the reason that I like it is because if you are a person who isn't buying every single marker, which is totally fine because markers cost a lot of money, I'm going to show you how you can kind of work with what you have to create other colors. That's kind of the whole point of this video. I had no other reason to make this card other than because I wanted to, which honestly I am here for. I have been bogged down recently with a lot of assignments from different companies that I work for, and so I haven't had a chance to really just sit down and play. This brilliant, absolutely brilliant chart is a hex chart. It's from Sandy Allnock. She has one for the OLO markers, for the sketch markers, and for Copics. Now, the Copic one I have used for years. She came out with that years ago, and I've used it religiously since then. As soon as she came out with these other two, I snatched them up. They're like $5-6, but they are so incredibly helpful because they do not categorize the colors by their numbers. They categorize the colors by what they actually look like. So it is so tremendously helpful to see the colors that you have, and then you can very easily look at your chart and see, okay, I am missing this section of colors. When I save up my pennies and I'm going to buy more markers, this is where I need to buy them at. Plus it's just pretty. I mean, honestly, who doesn't want a pretty chart for their markers? They're very pretty. I like that. That may not be that may not be a selling point for you, but it certainly is for me as a consumer. So I would recommend those. Moving on to the actual coloring. So here, the blue violets that I have are kind of desaturated, is the way that, like, they're just more on the gray side, and you saw the big bright background that we did, and so I would definitely want these to be brighter. So I'm going to go through, I am coloring these as how I color everything. I started with my lightest color, move out to my darkest, back into my lightest. The OLO markers, because they have that free-flowing ink, are a bit juicier, so I am showing you how I normally color. I am using the Nina 80-pound solar white cardstock. They actually recommend that you use Express It, but I'm working with what I got. And I haven't really had an issue. Do I have to be a little more light-handed? Maybe. Especially with the color glazing, because we're putting down multiple layers of ink. But honestly, I didn't have any bleeding with this at all, and I was super happy with the way that they came out. So we're adding the shadows any place the 2 points meet. We're adding shadows anywhere one object lays on top of the other. So for like that little middle petal that you can barely see, that whole middle flower is on top of that petal. It's going to be very dark. That's okay. It should be. There should be lots of shadows there. Where a petal is folded up over itself, shadows there. The reason that you see me coloring the center part of the flower, leaving those edges white, is because that's how they actually look in real life. They have a lighter area there. Sometimes it's even white. I'm not going to leave mine white, but that is an option for you to leave it white and just maybe use some grays to put in some shadows. But so I'm coloring the center with the color, the blue violets, and then I'm leaving the edges white, because when I color glaze over it, it will be the color in like its purest form, with a little bit of an addition of the lightest color. So that's why I haven't added anything else to that. I will just be filling that in with the lightest color right before we do the color glazing technique. Because these are so juicy, the lightest color really does kind of knock back the darker colors quite a bit. So they're super easy to blend, which is very, very helpful. But if you're looking for dimension, you may need to go back in with your darker color and just put that back in. So here we're filling in those white parts again with just the lightest color. And now we're going to do the color glazing. No, I'm lying to you. Now we're going to color the other flower. What is even happening? So we're going to color the other flower. First of all, I wanted you to be able to see that what the difference would be when the color glazing is done. I just thought I glazed it first, but I didn't. So here I'm not going in with my lightest color first. Here I am going in with my darkest color. If you have a problem with them bleeding, then this is what I would recommend that you do. Go in with your darkest color, work out to your lightest color, so you're only putting down one layer of each color, which will prevent the bleeding from happening. I still colored the other one my original way first, because I have never colored these before. So it gave me an opportunity to practice and kind of get comfortable with how the flower looks and where my shadows should be laid. So if you're super worried about bleeding, maybe do a practice piece first, starting with your lightest color and working out to your darkest, and then darkest back into your lightest, so you can get comfortable with kind of the shapes of the petals and things, and then you'll be more confident going in starting with your darkest color. So yeah, there's that. I feel like I'm talking 100 miles a minute, and I probably am, because let me tell you why. So it's no secret that my husband has a job in which he works a lot of weird hours. Well, a lot of hours, and they're weird. And so he is on call this week, and he is not home. Color glazing, back to the card. So here, first things first, it's a blue violet, so I wanted to see if I liked the violet more. So I picked a brighter violet color, went in, color glazed with that. You can very, very clearly see that there is a difference between this flower and the other flower. I did not like this. I wanted them to be more blue. So then I went in, I chose a light blue. I'm going to try that. Very, very quickly I realized that this is going to make no difference. So then I go up one to the next darkest blue. This is the blue I'm committed to. It brightens up the flower. It is still very clearly a blue violet. Is it heavier on the blue? Yes, it is. But that's what I wanted. So if you go in with your first color to kind of glaze everything and you don't love it, this is me taking it off the screen to compare it to my background and make sure I'm going to be happy with it before I commit to doing the second flower. If you go in with one color and you're like, okay, I thought I was going to like it, but I don't love it, fear not. Just go in with another color. It's okay. As long as they're analogous colors, which means they're next to each other on the color wheel, all will be well in the world. Like, you can't color a flower red and then decide you want it to be green and go in with a green and think that it's going to be green. It's not. It's going to be brown because you've mixed two complementary colors. But as long as they play nice together and they're next to each other on the color wheel, you should be able to glaze over them with no problem, creating a completely different color than what you already had, consequently cutting down on the need you have for the amount of markers. So now all of these are colored. I'm going to go in with my leaves. And again, first time I'm coloring it, so I'm starting with my lightest color, working out to my darkest back into my lightest, just for me to get comfortable. And then I did not show them to you because the process is entirely the same. But for the rest of them, I just started with my darkest color. Here, for these two little leaves down here, there's no line that delineates that there's two leaves, but I can tell that there's two leaves because of the way the veins of the leaf are drawn. Just pick one to go below. So I picked the larger one to be underneath, and so that is where I am adding my darkest shadows, leaving a very light edge. And then again, because these markers are so juicy and the lighter colors really knock back the darker, I can go over that little sliver that I want to be on top, and it will remove it quite a bit. So now that all the coloring is done, I am going to start in on my die cutting. These die cuts are fantastic. You guys know I don't love a white outline. Hero has somehow found a way to make them very close to themselves, like very, very close to the edge, and it's great. Anywho, before we go back to talking about story time with my husband, there are some things that I do need to tell you before we go on. The first thing that I need to tell you is I am teaching at the Hero Arts Stamp Along for spring. I am doing what am I doing? I'm doing a watercolor card. So if you are interested in that, I will link it below. They have, let me think, what is it? They have a product, what are they calling it? A bundle. Oh my gosh, Kelly, a bundle. They're calling it a product bundle that you can purchase that will give you all of the things that you need for the entire stamp along. There are so many wonderful instructors, so many good ones that I would definitely recommend you check out. I am one of them. I'm one of them. I'm recommending myself. But anyway, so the spring stamp along class is one purchase, and then the spring stamp along bundle is another purchase if you want to make along with everything that we are making. Otherwise, you can just learn some techniques and then apply them to other things. So with me teaching are a lot of wonderful people from Hero Arts. So Mindy Egan, Daniel West, Jennifer McGuire. Everybody loves a Jennifer. Nicole Spores also teaching. My girl Lydia Fiedler. So there's just a lot of really super wonderful teachers that you will learn a lot from. But anyway. So I will be linking that below if you want to participate in that. It is a live event. So we will all be teaching live. The early bird pricing cuts off at March 15th. So 4 days from now, there is early bird pricing that you can pick up the class just a smidge cheaper. And then the same thing for the bundle. The bundle contains all of the main products that you'll be using in the spring stamp along at a discount. So you would be able to get all of those things and they would be discounted. So there's that. Okay, let's see where we're at in the card. So I really wanted to tuck my flowers into these little frames because I love a framed look. I love it. It makes it super clean. But I wanted them to be a little bit popped up. So I stacked 2 of those frames together for just the end pieces, and I glued the middle one down flat because I knew my flowers would be overhanging that, and I didn't want them to be super tall, just a little tall. So I'm going to get my flowers in place, and then I'm going to like slide them into the frame. Like I'm going to slide the frame around it so that they are tucked under on one side, but popping up on the other side. So you can see here, that's what I'm doing. And then the first time I did it, I put the glue on the flower and then put the frame on top. Don't do that. Don't do that. And before you do this portion, trim down your outside panel. I didn't do that either. Like that before we got to this gluing portion would have been the time to trim the panel. I did not do that. So here I have my frame glued to my flower, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to slide the frame over the flowers. I'm going to position them. And then this time I just kind of lifted up the frame, put the glue on the back side of the frame, and then smushed it down. Do it that way. That way is much, much easier. So back to my husband. So my husband works weird hours. He's on call. And, because of that, there's always overtime. Now, we love overtime. We build at least 8 hours of overtime into our week every week because that's just the life that we live. So he's already had his 8 hours of overtime for the week, and then he ended up picking up something else, and this one wasn't overtime. It was just kind of like adjusting his hours on Friday morning. And then last night, of course, there was more shenanigans that went on, so he ended up having to go in today. So his 8 hours of overtime in a week that he normally works has now turned into 16. He's working like a whole extra other day, which means I am speaking like I can make this video go any faster because I am solo parenting and Miss Jellybean is sleeping. So I'm out here on a wing and a prayer, hoping that she will continue the sleeping until I am done with the voiceover. I don't know whether or not that's going to work out for me. And so my voiceover may end up being completely disjointed because part of the way through I may have to stop to, to be a mom. So I've glued those in place. Like I said, I should have trimmed it beforehand, but I didn't. And if you're like me and you also didn't, I'm going to show you how I did it. Here, I've put this into my paper trimmer and I am trimming around the portion of the flower that's going to hang off. And then I'm going to flip it on the other side and I'm going to do the same thing. So I ended up trimming it down so that it would be 8.5 by 3.25. 3.25. 8.5 by 3.5. So that is how I trimmed it so that I wouldn't cut off the flowers. I just left a very thin section on the underside where it was connected behind the flowers. And then to finish it off, I'm going to flip it upside down so that I can see. I'm going to make sure that my edges are underneath the flower. And then I will trim just that one section off so that I don't end up cutting off my flowers and my line is still straight. Because I cannot be trusted to cut a straight line all the way across by myself. So now that that is done, I am using my powder tool to do some heat embossing. So I'll treat it with my anti-static tool, and then I'm going to stamp it in the unicorn pigment ink. This will complete my sentiment with the happy birthday. You guys know that I like to have happy birthday cards, just, because you never know when you're going to need one, and there always seems like I need one and I don't have one. So that if I'm making an extra, like just because I want to sit down and have a play, then I'm making a birthday card. So I did that, trimmed it down, and then the middle of the flower, you guys saw when I adhered them down, I added a little bit of foam on the parts that were popping up out of the frame. So I kind of have to compensate. Also, if you're having a little bit of trouble with where to put your sentiment, don't be afraid to turn your card. This card totally would have worked as a vertical card. I just didn't like it because the happy went edge to edge and I wasn't thrilled with that. So in order to make sure that my happy is secure and it is even and not like humped up in the middle, I am going to put in a little bit of foam tape. You'll see that I have no foam tape where I'm going to put the glue portion. And that is the part that will be right up against the flower that already has foam tape underneath it. So I'm going to put that happy down. I didn't even talk about how I offset the shadow. I offset the shadow. I offset the shadow. Oh man, it's been a day. No, really, truly, both of my kids have been very, very well behaved, which I am super grateful for, since I don't know when my dear sweet husband will be coming home. So here I put foam all along the bottom, and then when I went to put it down, I very quickly realized this last piece of foam tape I didn't need because it was going to sit on top of my flower. So I just pulled that off and then lined everything back up, making sure my birthday was straight. Adhered that down, and of course we have to have more shimmer, more sparkle. These are the rainbow birthday gems. I reach for these a lot. I just think they're really good colors. But anyway, they have like a light blue, like aqua-ish color, and so I used those to accent my sentiment. And then even more shimmers, yes, you're welcome, into just the center like portion of the flowers, just to, so they have a little oomph there. And then in order to get rid of the white outline that's like in the parts that are actually laying on the colored background, I just picked out my OLO markers that matched. And if they didn't match, I made them match by doing more color glazing. And so I just went over and colored those. Obviously, a good portion of it is on the white background, so I really didn't have to do very much of this in order to get them to kind of blend in with their background. But I did have to do some. You could definitely skip that part. Last but not least, even more sparkles. This is the clear sparkle lacquer from Hero Art. Just doing some dots of this into the centers of the flowers. And then that is going to be the whole card. So thank you guys so much for joining me. If you decide that you want to do the stamp along, I look forward to seeing you live in class. And I hope you guys are having a good weekend. Hopefully I will be back tomorrow with another video. Fingers crossed. I appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.